We're live. And we are live on our channels, and welcome everyone to another of the Think Young webinars. Today we talk about an extremely important topic, and one that is very dear more and more to young people, as we've seen in the last years, but to the population at large, and definitely the most important topic of the recovery plan for Europe. This year, the EU dedicated the European Green Week to zero pollution ambition for air, water, and soil, a key action of the European Green Deal that seeks to prevent further pollution and promote pollution reduction. The European Commission is also working on an extremely ambitious plan. It's called Fit for 55 package, which aims at reduction of emission of 55% by 2030 and set the course for carbon neutrality by 2050. It's extremely ambitious. As we know, Europe has always been ahead when it comes to the environment. And if we look at the global scale and a global approach to the world, there are many things in which Europe usually is behind other part of the world, but when it comes to the environment, we can proudly say that Europe has always been on top of a topic. We are having this crucial discussion today to try to understand how coding can help accelerate the zero pollution ambition. Why coding? Well, because probably most of you know, one of the flagship projects of Think Young is the Coding Summer School, which we started 7 years ago with the support of Boeing. And in the last 7 years, we've been training over 700 kids, teenagers in Europe and in Africa on coding and technology, which is clearly one of the most important skills that young people will need to learn for the future. And we're trying to find this cross between this, how technology can help the environment, if I can. And this will also be the topic of the next coding school today. I'm honored to have some very special guests from different half of life, which is always good because they give different perspective. Joachim De Eugenio, which is Director Quality of Life at DG Environment for the European Commission. Valentina Vecchio, Global Sustainability Policy and Partnership Regional Lead Europe at Boeing. Boeing, which is a partner of Think Young in the coding school, and endless thanks to the Boeing team for this. Lubomila Jordanova, which is a CEO and co-founder of Plan A and the co-founder of Green Tech Alliance. And Dr. Susanna Zogby, deep learning engineer at Grey Parrot, which is a wonderful organization. You will hear later about that. As you know, at Think Young, when we do the webinars, we are always quite informal and quite straightforward. So we get deep into question number one, and we put Joachim on the spot for this. By now, most of us will be familiar with hearing about pollution, whether it be plastic, greenhouse gases, or many other examples. But many may not be fully aware of the consequences of this pollution crisis. So we think that before discussing ways that we can tackle the problem of pollution, it is important to start with asking why is tackling pollution so important? And Joachim, I want to hear your opinion. What are the consequences if we do not take immediate action?
Well, thank you, Andrea, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Hello to my co-speakers. It's really great to be here. Good discussion. And we also noticed that more and more young people, of course, are demanding ambitious action, which is why we're very happy to discuss now the policy options that we put on the table. But you ask about why is pollution important? I think pollution has been around in environment policy for a long time. And basically, pollution means entering substances, chemical substances, plastics, etc., in the environment too much. It's not about whether or not. Sometimes some of these substances are actually beneficial for you if you consume them in small doses or you're exposed to them in small doses. But it's all about the amount that we're doing. And this has been the issue for environment policy for more than 50 years. We have been trying to tackle too much of chemical pollution and other things entering the environment. And we have been successful. But we realized that we have far exceeded our planetary boundaries. We are doing too much of everything. Let's start with greenhouse gases. We all know the climate challenge, and we all know that if we continue our way of living, our way of producing, that our climate will change so dramatically that we will not be able to sustain life on this planet anymore, which is why we have the Paris Agreement and all our ambitious climate policy that you've mentioned. But whilst we have solved some of the pollution problems, new have emerged. So, for example, plastics in the ocean has gained a huge attention in the last couple of years, and we were shocked to discover that in a lot of plants and animals, these microplastics are accumulating and then coming back into our food chain. We have air pollution that is still not tackled, and where we're still having an effect on our health, particular vulnerable parts of the society on a daily basis. So to give you a few figures, the WHO estimates that about 1 in 8 Europeans are still exposed to too much pollution, which then is affecting the death rate in Europe. So where the deaths are linked to pollution, 1 in 8. I mean, this is enormous. It is one of the 5 causes of biodiversity loss, one of the top causes of biodiversity loss, pollution. And we have effects that we see in our daily lives in the short term. I mentioned air pollution, noise, and we have effects that are long term that we only see after a long time. And let me finish in my first short statement on that. Let me finish by giving you a little bit of a sense. If you work and want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 as such is today not making a difference. It's a neutral gas, and unless you're really enormous quantities in a closed room, it's not affecting you. But we know in the long term, if we don't reach climate neutrality in 2050, life on Earth will be very, very different than it is nowadays. But air pollution affects you today. You go out of the house, you cycle in a city where air pollution is still a problem, and it does have an effect. People who have a bit of breathing problems, asthma, etc., will feel this. So by making the right choice, and that I think is one of the main messages I think I will give also later, by making the right choice, for example, in terms of mobility, taking the bike, walking, you're having a win-win situation. You are contributing to our ambition to become climate neutral, but you're already improving the air quality today. And that's why the policy of the EU is really bringing all these elements together and creating a new way of living, a transition that we want to create, the green and digital transition that allows us to live a good, healthy, wealthy, well-being life with a sound and sustainable economy, but that is clean, that is within the planetary boundaries, and that does respect nature in the way that we should. Thank you. That's maybe for the beginning a little flavor. Happy to discuss further later more on this.
Thank you, Joachim.
You have to stop me, by the way, Andrea. I mean, I could talk for hours on this, so you have to tell me when I'm speaking too much.
Okay. I'll take out a yellow card and then eventually a red one, so that people are familiar in these days with this system. Thank you, and I really like the approach that we have an ambitious plan for 2050 and an even ambitious plan for 2030. But there are things we have to do today to improve our life today. That's really something that bring us back to the current situation, and I think that shows the urgency to people. When it comes to today, it is clear that, and we see it in the recovery plan, and we see it also, our world is going. Technology is clearly a large part of our daily life. And it can be, in this topic, a double-edged sword, in the sense that has caused, especially in the past, but has caused many environmental issues to date, but it's also key to addressing and resolving, not just addressing, but also resolving issues today and in the future. And many new technologies are clearly there to make the world more efficient and to decrease pollution. And this is really where technology is helping. And there is obviously the huge green tech sector that is booming. And Susanna, at Grey Parrot, I think you're probably best placed to tell us something about this. Is you guys are utilizing AI, artificial intelligence, powered computer vision as a game-changing strategy to improve waste management. And I really like the fact that you take something that some people think it's so, it's taking us to Mars, the artificial intelligence, and you use it for waste management. It's really the combination of the two is extremely fascinating. And lead, clearly, this helps us lead to a more circular economy. In your view, do you think technology and AI, in your case, is effective to combat the pollution crisis? How is this happening, and what you guys at Great Parrot are doing with this?
Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. Super happy to be here, and this is very exciting, actually. So yes, we're using technology to tackle recycling in particular. So we are helping material recovery facilities. So these are the facilities that actually gather all our recyclables and then turn all that waste into valuable materials. And currently, these facilities have a lot of inefficiencies or things that can be improved such that we don't waste any material. So currently, I don't know, perhaps some of you are already aware, but we generate 2 billion tons of waste every year, and only 14% of it actually gets recycled. And because of these stunning statistics, we need to do something about the efficiency with which we can recycle the valuable materials. So what we do at Great Parrot is that we give insights to the recovery facilities so that they can monitor the garbage that goes in. So we have cameras on top of conveyor belts, and all the garbage goes through the conveyor belts, and we're monitoring it such that we can say what's the composition of the waste. We can help to sort it if when we open our APIs for robotics applications. We can free workers from actually having to sort themselves, which is a really difficult job. And it's a job that requires a lot of courage to stand there all day and actually watch garbage come in and out. So this is what we're doing. So we're doing computer vision. So we recognize the items that go into the conveyor belt. We say which materials they are. We recognize which brands they are. They're Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever other brands come in. And then we give these insights to the material recovery facilities so that they can have better actions, so that everything that goes into the facility actually goes into the recycling. It goes recycled correctly, as opposed to ending up in a landfill.
Thank you. That sounds great, and I invite everyone who's watching to go and find you guys online, because they are fascinating.
Yes, and on your question on coding, we do a lot of coding, so it's super, super, super helpful. It's the thing that actually allows us to do this automatically, so that we can free the human workers, so that they can, do something else and not just having to, to look at waste all day long. So certainly super helpful.
Thanks, and that's actually a nice link, because you mentioned coding, and Ludmila back in 2017 co-founded Plan A, which is carbon reduction software. So considering we're talking about the software, I suppose there is a lot of coding behind in Plan A, and this carbon reduction software allow business to reduce their carbon footprint monthly, and there are many companies like yours that are using tech to combat environmental degradation. But I really liked the startup approach you guys are taking. I mean, when you started in 2017, and do you think that startups like yours, like ours, can actually make a difference as well? Sometimes we when we want to solve these big problems, we look at the big players, but sometimes our startups or small group of teams that come and bring the solution.
Absolutely, yeah. Technology and the startup mindset is definitely needed to be applied. It doesn't need to be a startup itself, but also to the corporate sphere. And what we bring to the table with our solution is essentially an optimization around automating data collection to transform this into better decisions that are good for the environment and also, of course, good for the company in improving its environmental footprint. For this, we have something that is actually the result of a lot of coding, a software as a service platform that enables companies to gather data, visualize it, and then automatically get suggestions on how they can reduce their emissions, including such related to waste, water consumption, as well as anything in their production or other types of activities. To go to your question in terms of how can tech companies and startups make a difference in combating environmental degradation, I think there's 4 key pillars to our work, and this is how we should be always having in the back of our mind a vision about the future. The first one is optimization of processes through technologies, and I think the Great Parrot example is fantastic as well, to show how something that has historically been really complex, human dependent, can now be turned into an automated vision for a more sustainable future. The second element is resource management. At the moment, we do not work in a cycle that is related to a circular economy in most of the industries. We work across kind of pillars and little batches of the pieces of work, but we need to find ways to close this loop. And this is where this resource optimization, resource management can be of help. The third pillar is related to engagement. I think technology with little changes to the way you do your code, to the way you do your user experience, can engage people into thinking about the environmental impact of the choices that they make. And it could be the example of an e-commerce platform adding a little tick box saying, do you want to filter for environmentally friendly brands or something like that? Or a company like ours that has at the core of its business model sustainability as an offer. And then the final that is really dear to my heart, and I think this is an important also moment we'll be talking about this, given in the light of the news from the last few days, it's about equality and also addressing discrimination, because the tech industry has this premium, I would say, skill capability, and I look forward to us discussing further why coding is so important, but we need to democratize access to these kinds of skills and make them widely available so that there's equal opportunity for people to enter into this space, which is becoming, at the end of the day, the dominant way in which all industries are looking forward towards the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Ludmila. And extremely, I like, I mean, all of them, but the third one, the engage part, I think it's, if we all are engaged in this in our small step, as Joachim said at the beginning, if you take the bike rather than taking the car, maybe, if you're engaged in the small step, that's really where you get to big results. And clearly big results also don't mean just a small step, but also the big one. And I mentioned before, that coding is going to take us to Mars. And if there is one company that is definitely there and on playing the roles in the space is definitely Boeing. And Valentina, you in your role, you see clearly, that environmental issues taking the center stage in the global agenda. You see many startups, innovators, inventions that are trying to save the planet. Data clearly shows that large corporations are responsible for the toxic environment. A recent report from CDP found that the 100 energy companies are responsible for 71% of all industrial emission, and that's out there. But what do you think should be the responsibility to make change? Really be sole responsibility of this corporation? And if so, what should they be doing, and how corporate is somehow looking at this and adapting to this?
Thank you so much, Andrea. Let me start, first of all, by thanking you and the Think Young team for having us here and be part of this dialogue today. And you could tell that I was taking notes because I really appreciate the opportunity of learning from all of your sectors. And I'm happy to contribute sharing the perspectives from the aerospace business. And in particular, I think in the past year, we have seen even more than in other circumstances how transport and aviation are crucial pillars of our economy and society. And we rose to incredible challenges, building bridges between communities among the world, providing relief, whether it was with medical equipment, with vaccines, repatriating travelers, transporting medical staff, and also supporting global supply chains. And as you said, this kind of role also comes with a responsibility to keep growing, but growing sustainably. And at Bank, sustainability encompasses environmental stewardship, social progress and inclusion, and value-based transparent governance. And last year, we stood up a new sustainability organization to core up and advance our sustainability strategy under the leadership of our first Chief Sustainability Officer, Christopher Raymond, to advance our vision for sustainable aerospace across environment, social, and governance pillars. And I think it's important to think not only top-down about the commitments of our leaders, but also how we embed sustainability in the way we work with communities, in the way we as employees engage around the world, engage with each other, and also how we build products and services. So I really like the point that was made about engagement. And I think we mentioned the European Green Deal, the upcoming Fit for 55 package. Those are ambitious policies that position us on a very important trajectory, not only for mid-century, but in this decade. I think 2030 is really the decade for increased action. And call on us in the aerospace, but also across other sectors of the economy to accelerate the pace of technology. And an aspect that I would like to highlight is that for us within the aviation value chain, accelerating innovation is only possible through collaboration and partnerships. We need to team up with one another. We need to think across borders because our sector is a global one, but also to think within the aviation value chain, how we can team up and partner, and beyond the aviation value chain with regulators, with startups, with R&D centers. And I'll just bring one example of the work that we do on collaboration and innovation. It's our Ecodemonstrator Program, which is a flying test bed that takes technologies out of the lab and tests them in the air. And those technology encompass from use of renewable energy sources, use of sustainable aviation fuel, composite materials, we're talking about recycling, but also ways of disinfecting the cabin environment. So it's a program that can adapt to new challenges. But the program wouldn't be possible without collaboration. So just to conclude, to your point of responsibility, I think it's an important responsibility, an essential one, and at the same time, one that discloses opportunities for collaboration and partnerships. A really exciting one.
Thank you, Valentina. And building on this part, when you say collaboration is key, and it is true, we all, in our small organization or large one, have to do our own effort, as we said before, but also try to collaborate in this. And I think in this one, I had a question probably for Ludmila, who come from this more startup environment. To reduce pollution, it makes sense, but different companies, different actors, different NGOs, institutions, everyone comes together, no? And the synergies are, as Valentina was saying, are really key. How do you think collaboration and competition can bring us forward? Have you seen some example of how this kind of collaboration and partnership can really accelerate the fight against pollution?
We, as a company, and also from the perspective of the Green Tech Alliance, stand behind the vision of collaboration, because we think that it's not really possible to achieve the addressing of climate change effectively if we only work as individuals or as companies. And we see it also, if I take the simple metaphor of how emissions are calculated, in the scope 3 of any company is where their suppliers sit, where their users sit, and this essentially shows you that you're really dependent on your stakeholders to achieve sustainability yourself. And if we look at the European Union agenda, which is really ambitious, and as you rightfully said, Andrea, is one that we should be really proud of as we're leading the way for the whole planet, we see that there's guidance for every single sector as well as every single type of stakeholder that is involved. So an example that is quite, I would say, effective that we've seen is with the Green Tech Alliance. We have more than 1,000 companies that are developing green technology, and each one of them has been checked for their scientific validity, as well as also has been checked for adhering to non-greenwashing standards. So really understanding what is greenwashing and actively working against it. And all of these companies have embedded in their business model the dependency on businesses or NGOs or individuals in order to achieve their own mission, which is kind of what actually was also mentioned by Valentina, is this kind of necessity that we have all to work together. The job ahead of us is really big, and it's something that we have so many to-dos on in terms of the list of things we need to achieve. So we're better off actually distributing the list amongst all of us rather than thinking that someone should be leading the show and probably like failing to achieve all of it by themselves.
Thank you, and I appreciate that you're talking also about the Green Tech Alliance, because it's clearly the example, no, of a collaboration and of an organization that, you know, it's popping up to try to build this synergy. So it's very good to have you here with this two hats, if I can say, you know, from a software company and from the Green Tech Alliance. We started the webinar, and I mean, obviously, Think Young, what we do is to look at young people. We started the webinar talking about the coding summer school and technology and young people. And I mean, it is clear that there has been an acceleration in the importance of the topic of environment when young people became activists and took the street in millions of them. And I remember it was when the whole thing started, it was autumn heading into winter. And I mean, you know, for one of you who knows Brussels, it's quite a cold, rainy day place. And on every Friday, regardless of the weather, there were hundreds of thousands of teenagers in the afternoon, so not skipping school. That's the thing, you know, it was not just I'm skipping school, that's why I do it. They did it because they believed in it. And they were coming down to Place Luxembourg, where we have our office. And it was really, really good to see so much engagement. And that's, I would say, the noisy part and the visible one, the one that gets the media, no? But then there is also a part of the young people, and that's why they link with the coding school, of some of them, you know, become inventors or create a startup, and they try to do it also, you know, behind the curtain, which really shows the engagement of youth on this topic. And I want to ask this, you know, first to Joachim, after to Susanna, how can we support young people in general to try to, you know, to have an impact on the environmental issues, but also how can we support young technological innovators, young technological inventors to make a greener, cleaner planet? Joachim, you can go first.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, first of all, you may know I'm working for DG Environment, and my commissioner is Commissioner Sinkevicius for the environment, ocean and fisheries, and he is the youngest commissioner ever. And I think, of course, it's for him, it's very important as a core subject. And what he came saying to us in the beginning was saying, I mean, young people, we're often talking about young people, what we can do for them, but we are not talking with young people, or young people are not part of the dialogue. That has changed completely in the last couple of years. I mean, due to the Fridays for Future and other activities, I think the voices are being louder than ever before. I mean, that's good. I mean, there's a need to listen, but it's not only about to listen. I mean, young people are solution providers. We see that here, great concrete examples. And it's not like you have to have 30 years of experience. Sometimes the equality also starts, if you look around in our daily lives, in our daily job situation. You know, I mean, I give you an anecdote from when I started, when I was young. There was a conference on water pollution and water management, and one of the speakers, a younger person, the youngest speaker in the audience, stood up in front of 800 people. It was in one country. I will not go into more detail. And said one of the problems why water pollution is still a problem in this country is because you just look around the room. It's dominated all by male engineers who are older than 50, and who all have the same mindset. I mean, and it was true. I mean, 80% of the people in the room were now what I am now. I'm a male engineer who's older than 50. Now, I'm not saying that they're not important part of the conversation, but it cannot be the only part of the conversation. It's not the whole society reflecting and thinking about the solutions which are good. So I think, first of all, listening. Secondly, making them part, like in every equality discussion. This is an intergenerational equality, but in every equality discussion, we have to represent in our decision-making bodies, etc., the whole breadth of society, and that's young and old people, men and women, and so on and so forth. So really, that's, I think, is key. So it is an equality discussion. But then, of course, it is about using the ingenuity and the innovation and the energy and the passion that a lot of young people have. Now, I don't pretend that I know what we have to do in order to help young people. I think that's, again, it's also for young people to tell us. I mean, what are the issues that you face? But I'm listening to all the others here to learn myself now. But I think that in the last 2 years, at least from my humble overview that I see, it is more and more awareness there is that we can be helping, that we from the European level, not only from the Commission, but all the other let's say actors at the European level and the member states can do more. And I think more is being done. That is, I see positive developments. We just had at our Green Week, for example, a hackathon with an organization which was very active in schools and so on. You are having this dialogue now. I have been in many discussions, and I keep learning more. But I think there is an opportunity to make that mainstream, to make the young people part of the solution providers of owning, sharing the challenges, as you said earlier, creating the partnerships, engage, because it can only help, and it is beneficial for the young people as well, because of course that is what they want to do. They don't want to talk about it, asking others to solve their problems. It's your future that you're shaping, and so I think we're in a very exciting time, and I'm very interested to hear also from the others what else we could do, because I think there's plenty of more things that I think we should be thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Joachim. And you actually said, we're listening to young people. To all the ones that are watching us on the different platforms, write your question for us in the platform itself. So with the account you're logged in, and in about 10-15 minutes we will take the questions. I move on now to Susanna. We were again about young people, but more, let's say, the tech side. Clearly with the link with Grey Pirate. How do you see how can we support young innovators, young startups, young inventors to really make a greener and cleaner impact and plan?
Yes, absolutely. So, well, one aspect of it, and I think it's quite obvious, but it needs to be worked on, is obviously education. So our education needs to be really strong. I strongly believe that everyone should know how to code, like everyone, all of us. You don't need to be a professional developer, but just having that mindset that you yourself can just quickly write a piece of code that does something that interests you. And it's like, learning to read and write and do math, also learning to code. I think that should be the next level of literacy that we should all have, at least a basic understanding, even if you're not a professional. Just like we are not all professional writers, but we can write. We're not all professional mathematicians, but we can do math. So in that same sense, we should all have some level of programming skills that we can do things with. That's one thing, education, fostering that. Another thing is fostering this growth mindset. So I used to believe that, like you were born with certain talents, and if you don't have it, you just don't have the talent, and that's it. And now that I've learned more and I have more experience, I realize that you can always acquire new talents. You can always learn more. You can always have, the things that you don't know, you can always just go ahead and get them yourself. You can self-educate, and the level of resources that are now available to you are enormous. So all it takes is, your initiative and your energy and your effort and your time to just go ahead and do it. So nobody's stopping you. Nobody needs to give you permission, but you need to have the mindset that you can do it. And the third one is having this entrepreneurial mindset, which goes together with the growth mindset. But in a sense, I think Steve Jobs explains it really well, is having this profound understanding that you yourself can influence the world that we live in. So to most of us, it seems like the world is the way it is, just because it is. But, to the entrepreneur, and having that mindset is actually, the world is a system that you can exert actions on and get results from. And fostering those mindsets, I think, is very important for the youngsters to to embrace, to practice, to just go with it and do things in the world that affect it. So it's all a learning experience. But for me, like as I look back, I wish I had more of that earlier on, so that I could see all the changes and all the things that I could do. And I hope to keep fostering that in myself and in others, so that we can all be the change that we want to see in the world.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you also to mentioning the entrepreneurial mindset, which is clearly something that is very much present in this generation, but it's always important to remind and to make sure that people have this in the back of their mind. Mm-hmm. One thing you also said, it's you mentioned again coding, which link us back to what I was saying at the beginning. The coding school we started with Boeing, we trained over 700 teenagers, and again, a bit of an entrepreneurial crazy mindset when Boeing and Think Young started this idea. It was 7 years ago. Coding wasn't as much on top of people's mind as it is today, and nobody, I think, would have ever expected such a success. And definitely a lot of credit goes to the team who work on this, but also from the Boeing side to the team who believed in this. I mean, I keep stressing it. It really takes a bit of craziness sometimes to believe in NGO and let them start something like that. And look where we are now. We're now looking at expanding in several countries, also in Africa. So it's really extremely important. And clearly, coding is one of the world's most sought after skills, without a doubt. That's a pure fact. As we can see, with Plan A, with Grey Parrot, it's making positive strides with the environment. And one question to Lubomila to link us to coding and young people. How can you think it can make a difference? Can inspire youth to take up more coding, and how you think we can make sure that young people really understand the importance of this skill, to then embrace it and eventually use it for whatever passion they have, for the environment, or to solve problems with the environment would be even great.
I think the simplest way of looking at it from the perspective of someone considering this, developing the skill, is looking at themselves today. If you look at the young generation, they're so connected to technology, and they're really embracing this kind of hybrid living, so to say, better than probably all of us. And if you look at technology as being able to solve issues of connectivity, you're always able to be connected with friends. If you look at it from the perspective of entertainment, you can then transform this into how can all of these actions that I do online be really applied to this big problem that I'm also personally concerned with. And if you take these kids that are part of Fridays for Future, that are young adults, or even maybe adults that have a young mind, there you essentially have the opportunity to merge these two passions into one and start seeing effects of your activities a lot faster. Technology is really this wonderful toolkit that has been given to us to optimize processes, to get answers to questions, to measure, and also to really optimize according to what is really needed. And if we have the right mindset in mind, which is related to addressing climate change, related to addressing waste management or decarbonization, then we can work to apply ourselves towards this. And I think I fully agree with what Susanna was saying. From today's perspective, it feels like every single person should learn to code, even in in the simplest way, because that's the language of the future. This is the language that is universally spoken, and it's actually a lot more well distributed across different nations, probably better than English. So with this in mind, we really need to, if we want to be prepared for the future, start working on that.
Thank you. And we are now, I think, getting closer to the Q&A, so even more questions from our audience. But the fact that we have Joachim and Valentina here, and obviously Think Young is mainly based in Brussels. We cannot avoid the topic of talking a bit about the EU responsibilities. And And starting with Joachim, we are seeing the EU, as we said before, clearly lead the way forward in preventing further pollution, especially with the EU Green Deal. Can you tell us more? And you said you can talk for hours, so that's, you can take 3 minutes, but I think would be probably a good proxy. But can you tell us more about the EU's plan and to combat pollution, and how they're going to achieve the ambitious target that we are setting ourselves?
Yeah, thank you. I will, of course, try to be short, and just to say, I mean, there's also, of course, plenty of information available. If you missed the Green Week, there were some wonderful sessions where you can hear, for instance, our President von der Leyen, our Commissioner, explaining it much better than I can. But just in a nutshell, to give you a little bit of an appetizer and hope for you to all be interested to find out more, is really that starting with the European Green Deal, you've already mentioned it, President von der Leyen has set out 50 actions for 2050, an agenda of a green transformation, a green and a digital transformation for Europe that is now using the next 10 years as the crucial decade for change to really make the world a better place in 2050 that we all want to live in. And within that, I think we have set out now a vision with the action plan that you referred to, that we just recently adopted. We have set out a vision that a lot of people say it's very ambitious, or even say not realistic, but that everybody actually subscribed to, who we spoke to, because we don't want to live in a world with pollution. Why would we want pollution? There is no purpose to it. Yeah. So our vision for 2050 is to live in a world where the releases to the air, to water and soil are at such levels that they do not affect our health and our biodiversity, and the planet as such. And I mean, that is in a way trivial. I mean, who would not want that? But it is extremely challenging. And for this, we have to pool all our energies, our resources, not in isolation or in competition to any other of the transformative reasons that we need to engage in, but together. So Ursula von der Leyen made it very clear that she wants an integrated policymaking. So what I'm very happy to see is that pollution policies at the European level is not one department dealing with pollution in one document and separate from everything else. From the first day, the European Commission has set out specific pollution objectives, actions. We have developed, for instance, a circular economy action plan. You will find there a very ambitious agenda on plastics, on waste, reducing waste, on hazardous chemicals in waste, microplastics. So we have very clearly set out, when it comes to sustainable production and consumption, you already mentioned yourself the circular economy, what we're going to do in that respect in relation to pollution. The way we produce food and the way it affects our biodiversity, we set out in May last year, when we were setting very ambitious targets, and for the first time saying we want to reduce significantly the pesticides and fertilizers that we use, and have a 50% reduction targets set for 2030, and of course the actions that would sustain that. We have presented a smart and sustainable mobility package, which brings together this world of sustainability and digital, to make mobility as a service that we all use, but not to make it the traffic that we're sometimes exposed to. Mobility is something we all need, but mobility has so many facets, and we're not using these many ways of moving around in the best possible way. And there, I think digital solutions can enormously help. And you see a very ambitious transformation of the mobility sector. As I only have 3 minutes, I'll stop here, because I could go on for many other examples, but it accumulated maybe then, or it culminated now in the action plan that I've just mentioned at the beginning, that we've just published. It rounds up the full picture, and we will basically, in the action plan, on one hand, look at the latest scientific evidence. There will be a revision of the Air Quality Directive. We will revise other legislation on industrial emissions, on urban wastewater, on water pollution as such, on soil. We will work on all these issues to say, what is the level that we think we should be achieving at, and where can we do better? And we will be monitoring all these activities, so that we get an overall picture. Are all these efforts that are happening everywhere, together with our climate agenda, moving us in the right directions? And it's very interesting to listen to all of you, because it's very much the same debate that we have. It's about collaboration and partnership. It's about engagement. getting everybody on board. It's about synergies. We don't want to compete with the climate agenda or with the waste agenda. This is all has to be seen together. It's all part of our life. You don't separate your life into the life that you have in the morning, the life you have in the afternoon, and it's all connected. And I think we need to embrace that. It is not easy, and for that, I think technology can provide a wonderful solution. But technology is as such neutral, and that's why what I like about this debate and about this discussion we have right now. We need to give coding a purpose. We need to give digitization a purpose. In itself, it's meaningless if it doesn't make the world a better place. So we need to bring also technology back to people. It's about people. It's not about technology. The technology is a means to an end, but it's the people who have to give it a meaning and have to give it a positive purpose. Digital for a purpose, somebody else said, and I think the green transition is the purpose that we believe digitization can use as a guide, as a compass, to make the world a better place, as you do it, as I can see now in your various projects that you're involved in. So I think that's an agenda that the EU has committed to. We will do our part, where we're very strong when it comes to legislation, financing. You mentioned the recovery funds. Yeah, we are looking very much at these aspects to help. But we cannot do it alone. It's only one part of the story, and we need all of you, all those who are listening in, to play their part. And that's why this debate is so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Joachim, and thank you for also the nice and kind word you said towards us. Valentina, if we can, you work closely with a European institution. You have a bit the pulse of a situation. And the EU can offer definitely as a mediator between, as Joachim was saying, corporation, innovators, entrepreneurs, startups, NGOs, definitely a very important role that the EU can play. And then also can clearly allocate budgets. So, they clearly can put an incentive to make sure that technological innovation goes in a certain direction and combat pollution in this case. Do you think from your, I would say, privileged position on the way you see the European affairs, do you think the EU is doing enough, considering their capabilities, to bring together everyone's strengths to combat these alarming environmental problems, and why?
So I could really echo what Joachim has just said, and I think your question is really timely. In particular, we mentioned at the beginning the Fit for 55 package. That would be a comprehensive package, including several measures that impact and support the aerospace sustainability agenda. And I'm thinking particularly of Refuel EU Aviation, which will be a first dedicated policy for the development of sustainable aviation fuels, building on the great work of the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy. And I think that piece of regulation will be extremely important for us, because when we look at sustainable aerospace, we have different pillars, different levers that we need to pull, thinking of the capabilities and limits of regions and various markets and aircraft sizes and mission. And so we need to think of fleet renewal, increasing fuel efficiency, maximizing operational efficiency, but also increasing the use of renewable energy sources and advancing novel technologies for the future of air travel. We need a portfolio of solutions. But where I think the EU can really make a difference and we can build further synergies is accelerating the transition to renewable energy sources. Because especially when I think of sustainable aviation fuels, for instance, we have proven that this is a technology already in use, already available, but we need to cross that valley from having an innovation that is technically feasible to actually commercially viable. And so I think Refuel EU will create that step, but then we also need to think not only of the EU, but also of member state. What is their role in ensuring incentives to couple any blending quota that we will see in the future, and also industrial partnerships. In the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, there is a key reference on advancing these constructs for the development of renewable energy and renewable fuels. So those are great opportunities to engage and do more and increase that synergy that Joachim was talking about.
Thanks, Valentina. And now, as I said, we lost Lubomila. I think it was probably a technical problem, but we hope she comes back. We are now opening the Q&A. So, Lubomila, I see your screen is charging and you're back. So Question on from LinkedIn, one of our followers, Charles. What role do larger tech players have in helping smaller companies and SME work towards these zero pollution targets? How can policymakers contribute to this exchange of best practice? I think the part of synergies is really what's underlying here. I don't know if there is anyone who wants to take this one on the larger tech players and the contribution of policymaking, please.
So maybe this is a moment to add a bit of a scientific perspective on things. For those of people from the audience who are not familiar on how emissions get to be calculated, there is essentially something called the GHG protocol, which covers emissions in 3 scopes. Scope 1 is related to facilities and vehicles. Scope 2 is related to energy, steaming, cooling, any kind of services purchased. And then Scope 3 is essentially these third parties, purchase goods and services, investments, assets, transportation, business travel, and so on. With this concept in mind, whenever you look at any of the frameworks that the EU prescribes as a formula for success in achieving net zero, you need to understand that this is the logic of the framework that is followed in order for us to understand how to mitigate negative impact on the planet. So if you take a company like a big tech layer, let's take Microsoft, because I have kind of an insight on how they're approaching this topic. They essentially have asked their suppliers and the small organizations within their supply chain to reduce their emissions by 50% within the next few years. Why? Because the tech company is actually dependent on these third parties in order to achieve its own net goals. But then, and that's legally essentially binding because there's such expectations on a policy level. And then as a second layer, they're essentially the ones sometimes, because we have also big corporates in the tech sector that really put even investment into decarbonizing these third parties. So if I can divide my answer in 2, on one hand, there's legislation. And thanks to the EU, this is something that is quite prominent on the agenda of the big corporates. And then the second element is maybe the more voluntary part where we're talking about maybe the next few months or years until properly some of these legislations don't come in full form, is about engaging your influenced entities and all of your stakeholders within your own kind of supply chain. And we see it, to be honest, throughout the whole, we work with a lot of banks. We also work with a lot of tech companies, and everyone is really putting effort into mapping out their whole supply chain and all of their stakeholders to really start understanding where do they need to put emphasis in order for this decarbonization to happen across the board.
Thank you. That was absolutely clear and comprehensive. If I can ask my team for the next question. Millie Lake, that's on Facebook. Do you believe that the big companies largely responsible for a pollution problem are really practicing environmentally corporate social responsibility and making positive strides? This is anyone who would like to reply on this? Please, Joachim.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't have a full overview, but I know that there are a lot of companies doing an enormous amount. I would say even every big company has a corporate social responsibility department, and there's a lot of things happening. I would say 2 things. First of all, it is always possible to do better. I think the dilemma we see is that that collectively as a society, both the economy, we as citizens, etc., we are not achieving the results. We have to define the level of corporate social responsibility and the investment that is going into that by the results that we're having. If we have progress towards climate neutrality that is sufficient, if we have a reduction of pollution, if we have a circular economy, if we have also the social dimension being taken care of, we should not forget that, that vulnerable people are being looked after, that this is also about employment, securing employment, etc. If all of these things are being taken care of, then it is enough. Until these things are a reality that we're faced with, we need to strive for more, no matter how much efforts are already happening by many companies. The second thing is, of course, there is huge differences and then comparability. Sometimes I would say it's probably also what we call greenwashing when it comes to the environment. So where you basically know that behind is not that much substance. that is why we're working on that type of aspect very intensively at the moment. You may have heard that the Commission is preparing a further legislation on sustainable corporate responsibility. Sorry, can't even pronounce it properly. Which basically makes some of the things that are commonplace in some of the most advanced players. So there's actually a lot of innovative and socially responsible companies who are doing a lot, but there is a disruption of the market because others get a free ride out of it. So we need to bring in standards that everybody has to adhere to and that go through the whole supply chain. And let's not forget, and that's, I think, is a very important point that we also make in our Zero Pollution Action Plan, is this is not an EU issue, this is a global issue. And we both import pollution from outside and we export pollution elsewhere. Sometimes our choices that are green here are causing an enormous amount of environmental effects elsewhere in the world. So we need to make sure that supply chains are all the way through fulfilling the highest standards of corporate social responsibility. Otherwise, we don't see the effect. We're just shifting the problem from one place to another. And I think nobody wants to be responsible for environmental pollution at the other side of the planet. So I think it's a demand from society, but the question is, of course, how to do that in a good way. Because, of course, we still need economically thriving companies. We still need global competition to work and so on and so forth. So it's a challenging topic, but I wanted to come in exactly to mention that we're working on this. And this is a core part also of the European Green Deal agenda. Thanks.
Thank you, Joachim. Extremely comprehensive answer and to the point. The last, I'm looking at the time, the last one, and then Evelyn, if we live in a digitalized world, why is the coding gender gap still unequal? Oh, this is an interesting one, opening a huge door, and I think Susanna definitely was very keen on answering. For our part, I can say that the coding school we do with Boeing in the last 7 years always had target of 50% girl participation, so full gender balance. And actually, in some of them, if most of them, we achieved even 70% of girls participation. So there was definitely an interest in the teenager. Then we lose them somehow through the years, not us as Think Young, but us as world when it comes to the STEM. Susanna, please.
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic very dear to my heart, because I am an engineer. I'm a computer scientist. So when you go to school and you see 80% of the class they're guys, and you're like sometimes the only girl, it can feel very intimidating, and it can feel like you just don't belong. So there are many psychological reasons why this is the case, why there's still such a gender gap. And one of these reasons is the way we see ourselves. And mostly when, our education systems and the media, the things that we're exposed to, if you think of scientists, you think of scientists as a man most of the time. If you say, the engineer, you think of a man. Like, it's a lot of biases that we have, that actually makes girls less likely to pursue careers in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think the narrative has to change. We need to see more women coding. We need to see more women engineers. We need to see more women mathematicians, so that we can see ourselves, when you are young, that you can see, oh, this is a career path that I could also take. But there's a lot of psychological reasons for this. Women tend to see themselves more as nurturing, as opposed to men that they see themselves as, the breadwinners. And these are largely stereotypes. These are stereotypes. Obviously, not all of us think this way, but there's biases that we do have that actually prevent us from doing that. So I think part of having these programs where we expose girls as young as possible to having these STEM topics is actually super crucial. So yeah, that's what I want to say.
Thank you very much, Susanna. And definitely a narrative that we all should try to change. We are trying to do our part.
Yes.
And last minute, I'll try to do something that we tend to do often when we are in these webinars. We ask our guests 30-second answer each. If you were in charge, what would you do? One thing, one policy that you would do. Now, the good thing here is that you guys are all in charge in your positions, so probably you're more familiar with this exercise. But when it comes to policy, one thing that you absolutely would like to happen to make sure that we can accelerate the zero pollution ambition. And I can start from probably Joachim, and then we going round.
Well, it's a bit unfair because I have so many things in our action plan that I would like to do that to pick one is a bit unfair. But I think ultimately what I would like to do more personally is really do what you've done with this discussion, is to engage with young people. I think it's so rewarding and powerful, and certainly we should do more. We're trying to do more, but I personally, if I were in charge and also decide for myself, I would even put more focus than we're already doing.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Susanna, if I can ask you.
Yes, for me, it's working towards a circular economy so that everything we produce actually gets reused and does not end up in landfills. So that's one thing. And the other thing is actually lessening our dependence on fossil fuels. I think those are the two things that I would focus on.
Thank you. Lubomila?
My one wish would be for the policymakers to establish a framework around greenwashing. I think until we don't eradicate marketing being equated to actual action for environmental protection, we're going to be probably doubling down on the efforts that are necessary to address the issues of climate change. And then, given we maybe are saying more than one thing, I'll add a bonus, and that is essentially more proactive collaboration between corporates, policymakers, and startups, because I think these are the three key stakeholders that are moving the fastest at the moment. Of course, sitting down on all the knowledge that scientists have offered us to essentially enable this really quick adoption of innovation, which is essentially the way for this big set of issues to be addressed.
Great. Valentina?
Well, Susanna mentioned the importance of the transition away from fossil fuel, and I think the collaboration point is something that is crucial. The main issue is really climate change, pollution, no borders. So we need to team up together to think globally, also in the way we act, and policy needs to think without borders. I think that would be the main thing we need to work all together on. And having this dialogue, this is super helpful because it keeps us all honest and accountable for what we do.
Thank you. And thank you very much, all of you. I started the debate mentioning the coding school. The next edition will take place in Brussels together with the Boeing team on starting on Monday, the 2nd of July. So we're all, sorry, the 4th of July. So we're all looking forward to welcoming the teenager and have this exciting exercise together with the Boeing team. I thank all the speakers who were participating today, and thank you very much, because as usual in what we're trying to do, we try to bring the conversation forward and trying to be a bit outspoken. You guys were extremely to the point, and definitely I learned a lot, and I'm sure all our audience learned a lot. This video will be available after the live on our social media, so people can watch it if somehow you connected late or you missed a part. Joachim just shared with us a couple of links to what the European Commission is doing, and we will make sure that these two links will be under the video, so that if people are more interested more in what the European Commission is doing in the digital solution for zero pollution, definitely that's something that we will share with our audience. Thank you very, very much, and well, to the next webinar. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.